If you're struggling with your photos coming out too dark or too bright, they're all over the place and you can't figure out why that's happening, well, I've got a jug of water and 3 empty glasses to explain it to you. We'll talk about that next. Hi, I'm Lynn Morton from ShutterBugLife.com, an online learning community of photographers sharing our images as well as our journey. But today I want to talk about a photography principle, a basic photography principle, and it's called the exposure triangle. And to help it make sense, I have a jug of water and 3 empty glasses. I'll show you how that works coming up next. But before we get into that, if you're wondering which lens you should buy next, or if you're confused by the dizzying array of options when you look at new lenses and try and think about purchasing them, I've got a resource for you. It's called the Ultimate Guide to Camera Lenses. I go through everything you need to know to learn more about lenses so you can make a good decision and know which should be your next lens and your best lens. You can download it at lenses.shutterbuglife.com. Now, into today's lesson, we'll talk about the exposure triangle. Now, this video is actually part of an overall course that I've done on learning your DSLR. It's everything you need to know to take your DSLR and shoot with confidence. I'll tell you more about it in the description below. All right? Now, let's get into the lesson on how you can use that jug of water and 3 empty glasses to talk about the exposure triangle. Okay, let's get started. This is module 1, and we'll start with some basic principles. You probably heard people talk about something called the exposure triangle. If you ever heard people talk about photography, and it sounds really complicated, but it really isn't. So what I'm going to do is break it down for you so you understand exactly what it is. Now, you have to understand more than anything else, a camera and dealing with photography is about light. As a photographer, you will spend the rest of your time as a photographer being obsessed with light. Now, if you look at the definition, you'll see that it's the process or art. I'm looking at my monitor here. The process of art of producing images using an action of light. This is what photography is. It's using light to capture images so we can tell stories with it, right? And so it's all about the light. And what you'll find yourself wondering is, how much light do I have? You'll find yourself wondering, what kind of light is it? Is it natural light, or is it manufactured light? You'll want to know what direction the light is coming from. And then you'll want to know how you can manipulate the light. Now, in this class, we're just going to concern ourselves with the first one, how much light? Because that is what you concern yourself with if you are thinking about exposure. Exposure has you wondering, do I have enough light? Enough light to take the picture. And the camera is designed to go out and look at any scene and look at the range of light to dark, how much light we have and how much dark we have, and run its own algorithms and analysis and say, in this volume of light, you need this much to take a good image, what we call a well-exposed image. Now, here's the issue. You can have, in any situation, the camera not get it right, whether it's the camera's fault or our fault. You can have a situation where you have too much light or too little light, or like we want just enough. I call it the Goldilocks Dilemma. You all remember Goldilocks and the 3 bears, right? The 3 bowls of porridge, and one was too little, one was too hot, one was too cold, one was just right. Well, we have the same thing with light. We can have too much, too little, and this is what we spend our time trying to correct when we are looking at exposure. If we take a photograph with too little light, it looks like this. It's dark. It's darker than it looks to you as you look at the scene, or as you decide you want to interpret the scene. Wherever your subject is, it's too dark there, and so that means we have too little volume of light. Of course, the other extreme is too much, and you will see it just blow out everything, and you can have a scene like this where it's just all white. Or, you know, basically all snow. Even though this is a snowy picture, in any picture it will look like this kind of snow. And what you want is it to be just perfect. And for most cameras, that's called exposure neutral. Not too dark, not too bright, it's neutral. It's right at the 0. Now, how does this work with a camera? So there are 3 levers that your camera uses to get the correct amount of light. 3 levers, 3 ways it does. And the first is how wide the shutter opens. So you take a picture and you depress the shutter. There's a shutter inside that opens and closes. And so now how wide it opens when it opens and closes is the first lever. How fast it opens when it opens and closes is the second lever. And then the third is this thing called sensitivity to light. How much light will you need to get the same picture with the other 2 combinations not changing? I know, it sounds a little complicated now. It's going to make sense as we get into it. So it's helpful, I think, to think about this as water. Light and water often sort of mimic each other in the way they work. And so it's helpful to think about it in that way. So let's say you have this gallon jug of water, and the gallon represents the correct amount of water or light. The correct amount of light you would need in a situation is represented by this gallon of water. Now, you have 3 glasses, and you can empty that bottle of water into the 3 glasses. Now, once you've done that, you can distribute the total amount any way you want to, as long as it doesn't exceed that gallon. So you can have the one on the right, which can be one of the 3 levers. You can have that one take most of the water, or you can have it move so that it goes the other way. But in any of those 3, they must equal that same gallon of water. Here's another way to think about it. If you were to pour that gallon of water through a funnel, and the funnel has a small opening, and you pour that gallon through that small opening, the water will take a long time to go through because it's a small opening. Now, let's say there's a larger opening and you pour that same gallon through. Naturally, you know the water will go through much faster because it's a wide opening. But it's the same gallon of water. It's the same quantity. You just get to decide, do you want to let a little bit go through for a long period of time, or with a wide opening, have it all go through fast. And this is what the camera is also having to decide. You have the same amount of light, but you get to decide, do you want a lot of light to go through the opening quickly on the shutter, or do you want it to go through a small amount of light over a longer period of time? And this is basically what we are doing with light. Now, let me show you what this looks like outside with an actual light meter. Okay, this is an app that's called the Light Meter. It functions just like a light meter does. It reads all of the light in the scene from the bright to the darkest, and it tells you what settings you should dial in on your camera. Now, this is built into your camera, so you don't have to worry about this when you're shooting. But I thought this would be a good example to show you how in any scene you can have multiple settings. So look here, you have ISO, you have your f-stop, and you have your shutter speed, all 3 going across. So let's say we take our ISO to 100. Notice how everything adjusts and it keeps the same settings. And if I move it up, you notice how that the shutter speed has to now also move to compensate for it. If you move the f-stop, something else has to move. So that's the point. When you move any one of these 3 to keep the same amount of light, you have to move something else. So as I was saying, and you move any one of these, you can keep the same amount of light, but when you choose move any of these two, creatively, you'll get a very different image. And so you just have to know now that you can make an adjustment with any of these, but you'll have to adjust something else to compensate for it. And you do it creatively to get a different effect on your photograph. I'll show you what that looks like next. All right, so you see how that works. So basically what you need to know is that all three of these levers are interdependent, meaning when you adjust one, something else has to move to keep the same quantity of light. If you open your aperture, the shutter speed has to now react to also throttle the amount of light coming in so that it keeps the same volume of light throughout the entire time it's, gathering light based on that situation. And so this is called the exposure triangle. All three of these levers, how wide the shutter opens, how fast it opens, and then the sensitivity to light, all three of these will equal your exposure triangle. Now, what we'll do is look at each of these levers individually, and I'll tell you what they'll do creatively. Well, that's it for today. I hope that was helpful for you. Of course, there are resources in the description if you want to learn more about the exposure triangle and how that fits in with how you shoot. As a matter of fact, one of the earlier videos we did on choosing the right shooting mode would be a good next step from today's lesson. So go check that out. And remember, you can download your ultimate guide to camera lenses. That's it for today. I'll see you again next Thursday. Have a good week.